it?" I asked which one of 'em was him, and they all swore they wasn't. And I remembered the feller which run out of the cabin. So I looked round and seen him just leading the hoss out of the corral to ride off bareback. "You stop!" I roared, letting my voice out full, which I seldom does. The acorns rattled down out of the trees, and the tall grass bent flat. And the hoss Ridgway was fixing to mount got scart and jerked away from him and bolted, and the other hosses knocked the corral gate down and stampeded. 3 or 4 of them run over Ridgway before he could get out of the way. He jumped up and headed out across the flat on foot, wabbling some, but going strong. I could have shot him easy, but I was afeared he'd hid the gold somewheres, and if I killed him he couldn't tell me where. So I run and got my lariat and taken out after him on foot, because I figured he'd duck into the thick brush to get away. But when he seen I was overhauling him, he made for the mountainside and begun to climb a steep slope. I follered him, but before he was much more than halfway up, he taken refuge on a ledge behind a dead tree and started shooting at me. I got behind a boulder about 75 foot below him and asked him to surrender like a gent, but his only reply was a direct slur on my ancestry and more bullets, one of which knocked off a sliver of rock which gouged my neck. This annoyed me so much that I pulled my pistols and started shooting back at him. But all I could hit was the tree, and the sun was going down, and I was afeared if I didn't get him before dark he'd manage to sneak off. So I stood up, paying no attention to the slug he put in my shoulder, and swung my lariat. I always uses a 90-foot rope. I got no use for them little bitsy pieces of string most punchers uses. I throwed my noose and looped that tree and sot my feet solid and heaved and tore the durned tree up by the roots. But them roots went so deep most of the ledge come along with 'em, and that started a landslide. The first thing I knowed, here comes the tree and Ridgway and several tons of loose rock and shale, gathering weight and speed as they come. It sounded like thunder rolling down the mountain, and Ridgway's screams was frightful to hear. I jumped out from behind the boulder, intending to let the landslide split on me and grab him as it went past me, but I stumbled and fell, and that durned tree hit me behind the ear, and the next thing I knowed I was traveling down the mountain with Ridgway and the rest of the avalanche. It was very humiliating. I was right glad at the time, I recollect, that Miss Sue Pritchard wasn't nowheres near to witness this catastrophe. It's hard for a man to keep his dignity, I found, when he's scooting in a hell slew of trees and brush and rocks and dirt, and I become aware, too, that a snag had tore the seat out of my pants, which makes me some despondent. This, I figured, is what a man gets for losing his self-control. I recollected another time or two when I'd exposed myself to the consequences by exerting my full strength, and I made me a couple of promises then and there. It's all right for a single young feller to go helling around and let the chips fall where they may, but it's different with a man like me who was almost just the same as practically married. You got to look before you leap was the way I reckoned it. A man's got to think of his wife and children. We brung up at the foot of the slope in a heap of boulders and shale, and I throwed a few 100 pounds of busted rock off of me and riz up and shaking the blood out of my eyes and looked around for Ridgway. I presently located a boot sticking out of the heap, and I laid hold onto it and hauled him out. He looked remarkable like a skint rabbit. About all the clothes he had left onto him besides his boots was his belt, and I seen a fat buckskin poke stuck under it. So I dragged it out, and about that time he sot up groggy and looked round dizzy and moaned feeble. Who the hell are you? Breckenridge Elkins of Bear Creek, I said. And with all the men they is in the state of Nevada, he says weakly, I had to tangle with you. What you gonna do? I think I'll turn you and your gang over to the sheriff, I says. I don't hold much with law. We ain't never had none on Bear Creek. But such coyotes as you all don't deserve no better. A hell of a right you got to talk about law, he said fiercely, after plotting with Badger McVeigh to rob old man Clements. That's all I done. What you mean? I demanded. Clements robbed McVeigh of this here dust. Robbed hell, says Ridgway. McVeigh is the crookedest cuss that ever lived. Only he ain't got the guts to commit robbery hisself. Why, Clements is an honest miner, the old jackass, and he panned that there dust up in the hills. He's been hiding for weeks, scared to try to get out of the country. We was hunting him too industrious. McVeigh put me up to committing robbery? I ejaculated, aghast. That's just what he did, declared Ridgway, and I was so overcome by this perfidy I was plumb paralyzed. Before I could recover, Ridgway gave a convulsive flop and rolled over into the bushes and was gone in an instant. The next thing I knowed, I heard hosses running, and I turned in time to see a bunch of men riding up on me. Old man Clements was with 'em, and I recognized the others as the fellers I stopped from chasing Sue Pritchard on the road below Red Cougar. I reached for a pistol, but Clements yelled, "Hold on! They're friends!" He then jumped off and grabbed the poke out of my limp hand and waved it at them triumphantly. "See that?" he hollered. "Didn't I tell ya he was a friend? Didn't I tell ya he come up here to bust up that gang? He got my gold back for me, just like I said he would." He then grabbed my hand and shaked it, energetic, and says, "These is the men I sent to Tomahawk for, to help me get my gold out. They got to my cave just a while after you left. They're prejudiced agin you, but—" "No, we ain't," denied Yaller Whiskers, which I now seen was wearing a deputy's badge, and he got off and shaking my hand heartily. "You didn't know we was special law officers, and I reckon it did look bad, 6 men chasing a woman. We thought you was a outlaw. We was pretty mad at you when we finally caught our horses and headed back, but I begun to wonder about you when we found them 6 disabled outlaws in the store at Red Cougar. Then when we got to Clements' cave and found you'd befriended him and had lit out on Ridgway's trail, it looked still better for you. But I still thought maybe you was after that gold on your own account. But of course I see now I was all wrong, and I apologizes. Where's Ridgway?" "He got away," I said. "Never mind," says Clements, pumping my hand again. "Kirby here and his men has got Jeff Middleton and 5 more men in the jail at Red Cougar. McVeigh, the old hypocrite, taken to the hills when Kirby rode into town, and we got 6 more of Ridgway's gang tied up over at Ridgway's cabin, or where it was till you burnt it down. They're sure a battered mob. It must have been a awful fight. You look like you been through a tornado yourself. Come on with us and our prisoners to Tomahawk. I buys you a new suit of clothes, and we celebrates." "I got to get a feller I left tied up in a tree down the gulch," I said. "Jack Montgomery. He's at Loco Weed or something. He's crazy." They laughed hearty, and Kirby says, "You got a great sense of humor, Elkins. We found him when we come up the gulch and brung him on with us. He's tied up with the rest of them back there. You sure was slick, fooling McVeigh into telling you where Clements was hiding, and fooling that whole Ridgway gang into thinking you ain't